Good afternoon, everyone. She had to turn on the camera. Welcome. So glad to see all of you here. And today we have quite the program, and I'm so glad that those are here and those that will be watching Channel 2 will find Kim's program of interest. If you would silence your cell phones, that would be very helpful. And Joe Chase, our Vice President, will introduce any new people that have been here for the first time.
Hands up, anybody? Anybody new? Don't be shy. There's one way back in the back. Looks like it, but that's okay. Your name is?
Helen DeMoss.
And where do you live now?
I live over in Craigmont.
Okay, and where did you come from?
I'm born and raised in Iowa, but recently had, last 3 or 4 years, had lived down at the Lake, the Ozarks, and moved here to be closer to family.
Sounds good to me. So how long have you been here?
Since November 13th.
Well, good to have you at the meeting and try to come every month. It's a great meeting. So, anybody else? Don't see anybody else?
Thank you, Joe. Can you all hear me in the back? Okay, good. Just another reminder, bring your friends and neighbors and you know the rest. This is an important meeting where the residents here are all part of resident council, and it's a good way to stay in touch with what's happening in the village. Now we'll have a few words from Dan Rexroth, CEO of John Knox Village.
Be very brief, and first of all, just thank Kim and his team. Steve is back there. Wave, Steve. They have led a wonderful process. They direct the budget process. They handle obviously all the finances of the village, do a fantastic job, and just wanted to give kudos to them for the wonderful work that they do. And Kim also is a great presenter. I hate to set him up today, but he's a great presenter. He's going to give this presentation to about 6 different groups. So the communication, the transparency, we really try to get the word out as much as possible. And so he's been on the road and will be on the road here over the next few weeks. You think, how difficult is it to put together a budget? Well, let me tell you, we start this process in September for an April 1st start for the fiscal year. So from September to April, we're working on this. There are about 40 people who have input on the budget. Those are directors, managers, people that are spending those budgets and have responsibility for those budgets. So 40 people with 60 different departments at John Knox Village. So some of those departments are really large, big multi-million-dollar groups with a few hundred associates, and some of them are smaller, but 60 different departments. And how many line items are in the budget? Well, about 2,500 line items in the budget. So how would you like to do multiple reviews of all of the line items in the budget? It's a significant process. So thank you, Kim. Thank you, Steve. That's why Kim wears glasses.
Thank you, Dan. And now we will hear a few words from Maria Timberlake, Vice President of Senior Living.
Hi, everybody. Yes, budget season is almost done. Yay! I don't have a lot for you today, but I did want to let you know, just as a follow-up to my presentation last month, that I've prepared a report for The Voice that comes out the last Friday, whatever date that is, of February, about the resident satisfaction survey results, including the charts that compare the 2023 results to the 18 and the 15 results for all the different factors that you rated. So I know I shared a lot of numbers, and afterwards you might go like, oh, what did she say about that? So it will all be in writing for you to look at, and that may prompt additional questions or ideas or suggestions. So please don't hesitate to pick up the phone and give me a call if there's anything you want to discuss, or if you want me to come to your neighborhood meeting or another group to talk about the entire survey or part of the survey. I'm more than happy to do that, and because that's a lot more fun than talking about the budget. Sorry. It's just kind of exhausting for everybody. So also, I hope you guys are going to be able to stop by the Villager Salon this afternoon with the grand opening, or maybe you have an appointment starting tomorrow. So we're excited about another piece of the Villager puzzle getting done following the reopening of the restaurant. And I've been off a couple days, but I understand we've made progress on the bowling alley, so I'm going to pop over and see that when I'm there. So we're going to keep on making those improvements, and hopefully that'll further enhance your satisfaction. So thank you.
Thank you, Maria. And now we'll hear a few words from Diane Demarest, who is president of John Knox Village Foundation.
Thank you, Janet. I never know. Can you hear me? Okay. Well, our last ambassador meeting was this past Friday over at the Meadows Community Room, and we were privileged to have our CEO president, Dan Rexroth, speak to us. Dan shared many interesting items with us. One little tidbit was kind of interesting. I'll bet you don't know. John Knox is the largest water consumer in Lee Summit. Well, we laugh, but you know what? That earned us a seat, a representative to have a seat on the Lee Summit Water District. So that's kind of important too, yeah. But the best, most exciting, well, one of the most exciting things was, and there was clapping and cheering, when Dan announced that Brian Opeka is staying at the Village. Isn't that marvelous? Yes, we were all so thrilled. I know there was some reorganization that took place for this to happen, but we're thrilled because we all know how dedicated and wonderful Brian is. So that is good news to share for sure. Dan also touched upon the fact that the foundation and John Knox are partners. We're in a partnership together. We're all working toward maintaining and ensuring that we continue to have the wonderful lifestyle that we do have here in John Knox. So it's a pleasure to work as an ambassador for John Knox as well as to be on the board. But I thought it was wonderful for Dan to recognize and talk about this a bit. So Gail, our president of the foundation, spoke to us. She updated us a little bit on the fact that the Veterans Memorial has met over half of its financial goal to start the Veterans Memorial. And a lot of you are excited about the dog park that's going to take place. And that's going to be a nice addition for so many of our residents. Our meeting will be March 1st, back over in the Meadows Community Room. This will conclude my term and a lot of others. So in April, there will be a nice luncheon to say farewell to some of us and to welcome some new ambassadors. So I want to mention, if any of you are interested and want to learn more about the ambassadors or feel like you might like to serve in that capacity, please give Gail a call, Marcia a call, me a call. Be happy to visit with you about it. Thank you. You all have a good rest of the day.
Thank you, Diane. I'm so glad to know that all of us are very clean with the water we consume. Okay, now we will hear from our 5 committee chairs, and first will be Jim Davis, who is Chair of Finance.
Thank you, Janet. As you've noticed, there will be 2 financial reports today, a lot of numbers thrown back and forth, so I'll try not to be too exciting with this report. Okay, the Finance Committee met on January 31st at 1 p.m. in the Missouri room, and I need to put my glasses on. We had 14 committee members and 1 prospective member, and the board liaison were present. Diane Stitchler, the executive assistant for finance, was also present as a guest. Kim Klockenga, chief financial officer for the village, presented the financial results for the month of December 2023, as well as fiscal year-to-date figures and information on the budget for our next fiscal year starting in April. Since Kim will be presenting the new budget later on today's program, this report will only cover the December and year-to-date financial information presented during the meeting. The financial results for December reflect a change in the trend from October and November, where the operating contributions was unfavorable to the budget and began pulling down the year-to-date net operating margin. The operating margin in December was 6.9%, sustaining the year-to-date figure. It is still a decrease from the second quarter, but above the year-end target of 6.5%. The operating margin is expected to decrease over the next quarter and end slightly below the 6.5% target. In the third quarter, benefit costs increased substantially due to a rise in workers' compensation and associates' health insurance claims. 2 issues made a big impact on benefit costs. First, several associates experienced significant health issues causing the stop-loss limits to be exceeded. The second is several large workers' compensation claims drove the need for higher reserves. Overall costs in December were down compared to October and November, but still higher than the average for the first 6 months of the year. The trend is likely to put pressure on the operating margin in the fourth quarter. The forecast for ending the year is 6.4% margin. It looks optimistic at this point. The margin will most likely be somewhere between 6% and 6.2%. Year-to-date total revenues for the village, including the $581,000 retroactive Medicaid reimbursement for last year, are unfavorable to budget by approximately $745,000, but it's still 12% greater than last year. In contrast, expenses are favorable to budget by $1 million and 8.9% greater than last year. Net proceeds from entrance fees are favorable to budget by $274,000. The year-to-date net proceeds are $12.5 million, which is $4.5 million favorable to budget. There are 16 pending entrance fee move-ins with $7.5 million in pending proceeds. The net proceeds from entrance fees annual target is $11.8 million. In summation, the village December financial reflect operating performance similar to November, with lower entrance fees but still equal to budget. The operating contribution is still $426,000 ahead of budget, and the combined actual and pending entrance fees have already exceeded the year-end target, with 3 months still remaining in this fiscal year. Operating costs were down in December, but overall the third quarter has shown increasing costs that are expected to lower the operating margin by fiscal year end. The overall labor costs have increased by $1.5 million, or about 5.3% over last year, but are still $1.4 million favorable to budget. Work on the Villager is largely complete, with a couple of minor projects open as of the end of January. The Places restaurant is open, and if you've not been there, it is really nice. The Places restaurant is open and receiving good reviews. January's weather has been rough on residents, as all of you realize, and staff, and the community's financials will most likely reflect increasing costs due to the severe weather. Our next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, February 28th at 1 p.m. in the Missouri room. And that's my report, Janet.
Hi, I'm Mary Ann Davis. Can you hear me now? Okay. Is that better? Okay. The Health Service Committee met on January 17th in Administrative Boardroom. Following approval of the November minutes, Anthony Colombato, Vice President of Health and Community Services, introduced our speaker, who was Sarah Conniff, MS, RD, CSG, LD. I don't know what all that means, but Sarah received her bachelor's degree from the University of Central Missouri in dietetics and nutrition, which also requires courses in chemistry and agriculture. She did her clinicals at KU Med Center, where she also received her master's degree and began her career working with inpatients. Ultimately, she missed having clients that she could follow past their hospital discharge. She explained that JKV is required to have a registered dietitian for assisted living and the care center. Previously, the village used a part-time dietitian. When Todd Hollander began managing food service for the VCC, he urged the village to hire a full-time dietitian. Sarah heard about this opportunity of this job opening from a friend and applied. Sarah's presentation followed a handout she provided titled Nutrition and Aging. In her work, she advises on food choices for chronic health issues, not necessarily weight loss. She discussed the following changes that occur as we age: sensory, such as loss or changes in our smell or taste, and structural, such as muscle mass, metabolism, bone density, and digestion. She offered suggestions for coping with those changes and discusses nutrition needs, such as calories, protein, fat, and water, and ended her presentation with a discussion of vitamins and minerals. She answered questions about nutritional items and diets advertised on television, such as Go Low and some of the other things you often see. She looks for diets that are realistic and science-based. She mentioned the Mediterranean diet as one that is well-balanced. Sarah offers medical nutrition therapy on a one-on-one basis to independent living residents, provides nutritional materials, and answers questions in person, by phone, or by email. She gives quarterly presentations on various nutrition topics and offers nutrition care consultation services for a variety of medical needs in assisted living assisted living residents. I'll get it out in a minute. And provides on-site medical nutrition care for the Village Care residents in her office at the Village Care Center. Her services are available to all residents at no charge. She will meet with residents in her office at the BCC or come to the resident's home. Anthony provided us an update of the health service units. In November, the VCC had a positive bottom line, and staff retention is up. Current capacity at the care center is 122 patients, and the recent census was 115. Having only 18 beds in the rehab unit can present a challenge, and occasionally requiring some rehab patients to be temporarily placed in the long-term care unit. Assisted living is doing very well, and the expanded memory care unit is full. Outpatient therapy has seen an increase in its usage by independent living residents. Their goal for 2024 is to increase community outreach to attract more non-JKV residents. Anthony continues to serve as the hospice administrator and is overseeing the JKV hospice licensure in Kansas, which is a very cumbersome process. Home health has had some staffing challenges, and they are currently doing some restaffing. The Curana Clinic is doing well and received very high marks on the recent resident survey. A committee member mentioned a retired teachers group as a resource for future speakers. Anthony was going to circulate a list of topics for committee consideration. Our next meeting will be at 2 o'clock on Wednesday, February 14th, in the administrative boardroom. And anyone that would be interested in serving on our committee would be welcome to come, but please call me, Mary Ann Davis, and I'm listed in the residence handbook. Thank you.
Hi. Yes, I have been to the dermatologist, in case you were wondering. I'm Frank Colburn. I'm chair of the nominating committee. The primary charge to the nominating committee is solicitation and recommendation of candidates for the John Knox Village Board of Directors when a board vacancy occurs. Over the past few months, you've heard me solicit residents to declare their candidacy and submit resumes. The committee guidelines for this require us to submit not more than 3 candidates. If more than 3 persons declare their candidacy, then we have a procedure for narrowing down the number to 3. This year we have 2 candidates wishing to be considered. I'd like to introduce them now, ask them to stand and be recognized. Tina Smith. Look at the camera, Tina, so those in television land can see you. That's great, okay. And Bill Boucher. You'll read more about Tina and Bill and their qualifications in the March Village Voice. Our guidelines now require us to forward Tina and Bill's resumes to the John Knox Board. The board has an internal procedure for the selection of their new member and will announce their selection in May. Thanks, Tina and Bill, for stepping forward for consideration. This is one of the most important positions a resident can have, and pretty soon one of you will be one of 3 in the 9 members board, and one of you will soon be our voice there. So thanks again.
I do better with this. The Resident Services Committee met on January 8th, and as usual, we had several topics. Our speakers were Kim Klockenga, Vice President of Finance, and Scott O'Brien, IT Tech Manager, who addressed the fact that Everfast has not provided John Knox Village with a timeline as they transition from consolidated communications. Scott has even researched whether to consider bringing in another company, so he spoke to why John Knox Village is being so patient. Spectrum had no interest at all in providing service to the village. AT&T is getting out of the TV business and has sold off DirecTV. Time Warner would be much more costly, and they do not provide phone service. Everfast is the only one that will provide TV, phone, and internet. They are also working on more senior products, such as an on-screen channel directory and larger buttons on the remotes. Your February voice will likely be from Everfast, not CCI, with a local phone number as they are a local company. Can do. John Knox needs more residents to subscribe to this service in order for it to be more cost-effective. At that point in our committee meeting, 3 members spoke about a wide range of issues that Can Do has solved for them, such as highly technical synchronization between devices. It was noted that as can-do deals only with senior adults, there is no tech jargon, much patience, and very prompt service. The village has arranged with Can-Do for classes at our movie theater. Also noted is that the cost for John Knox Village IT service help is $84 per hour. Billing, IT, and home health have instituted a new EMR system, that is electronic medical records, electronic medical records. And SARA, the campus-wide security system for those who use pendants, is close to completion. Maria Timberlake, Vice President of Senior Living, referred to a couple of local hospitals that had to shut down all their systems and relocate patients due to a cyber attack when an employee opened a bad email. All JKV associates must take a block of online cybersecurity classes, even though the village has firewalls and various backup in place to respond quickly in the event it might happen here. Our next meeting will be February 11th.
I'm Greg Calder. I'm with the Sales, Marketing, Communications Committee. Sandwiched between the Finance Committee report and the Director of Finance, I'm going to go light on figures today. But we had Eric Scott as our primary speaker for our meeting, our last meeting, and asked him to give us not only an overview of what's happened with the villager renovations, but in particular what we can expect as residents and sales points for future residents. So he said, number one, they started with about $1.4 million in a budget, which wound up comparing to about $1.8 million of requests. So what's new about that? And then about $250,000 had to come off the top on unexpected things just to get us started. So they really wound up with a overall budget of about $1.1 million. The Villager Salon and Places restaurant renovations were over budget. Villager was significantly over budget, but it's not like he can just spend money that he doesn't have. So the overall building program, renovation program of about $1.1 million was only over by about $12,500, which had to be made up elsewhere in the budget. So next time you see Eric or any of the people who've been overseeing some of that renovation, imagine what it takes on a daily basis to continue to look at those cost items and make sure all those projects got done. We did ask about unfinished projects, chairs and booths, all sorts of delays. Some of the booths are already in. The chairs are scheduled again for February 9th, we'll see. But Places Restaurant is largely finished. The marketing area renovations, behind concierge and those hallways down and around, that was not budgeted, but will be funded out of the capital, including the excesses of the fiscal year 24 entrance fees, so 25. So again, because we have an excess of those entrance fees, we have already proceeded and made contracts and ordered the renovations for the marketing area. Bowling area is, as you know, already under repair. A thanks to the foundation for adding another $50,000, so that project could get up and going. The Villager pool area, renovations to the pool deck and some of the surrounding area are in the plans but are not yet funded. That will have to be, we'll have to find that funding before those proceed. There is also some discussion about not major renovations, but repurposing the sunroom now that we've moved places back over to its regular place. So that was kind of his overview of what's happened in Villager for us over the last, I was going to say 6 months, a lot longer than that. Yeah, it really kind of stretched out. Again, you start a construction project and you run into things that you didn't expect, and they adapt. So many thanks to Eric Scott. Quick marketing update. End of third quarter, we are up on leads. The marketing department always appreciates leads from our residents, because you are people who already know what it means to live here, and when you send a lead to them, you've probably talked to those people. It's much better than a cold call. So instead of taking 6 or 8 contact points, it might only take 2 or 3 or 4. So keep in mind who you know that might be thinking about moving into the village, and forward those names to the marketing department. Deposits and move-ins are slightly below budget, but within range. And the development process, new developments, the updates, Meadows expansion is, are they all moved in now? I know there's none available. There were 2 pending. Yeah. End of this month, good. So there are all full, so we're happy about that. The Villa program, Phase 8, that was completed last year. They're all sold and occupied. Phase 9, which they're just now completing, they're on Larkspur and Craigmont. They are all sold, and the first family has moved in as of last week. So those are moving well, in fact, ahead of schedule. And we are, I think, at the point of our meeting, we had sold or gotten 24 of the 10% commitments on Courtyard Building E. As of 1/26, so about 2.5 weeks later, it was already up to 28. I'm guessing we're around 30 now. I mean, that changes almost daily also. Marketing is pushing hard so that we can get to that goal of 36, which will really help us then move forward in the financing. So we're excited about how all of the new developments are progressing. We're ahead of schedule on most of it. Our next meeting is February 15th, which is a Thursday at 9:30. We meet in the Manhattan Room across from Places. You're welcome to join us.
So how about a big hand for all the chairs of our committees and those on the committees? Thank you. All right, it's my privilege to introduce to you Kim Klockenga, Vice President of Finance and Corporate Treasurer, and he will give us the annual budget report.
Well, it's so good to be here. I sometimes forget how much information is presented at this meetings, and with you having the responsibility of going and sharing it, it's kind of overwhelming. I don't like to stand still, so. Okay, wow. It must be AI. It's taking care of, it's taking off on its own. So it's great to be here and to see all of you who are so engaged in the village. When I think about these committees and all the people who are represented, are part of these committees, it's very impressive to see, how engaged you are into the village, and that's such an important part of really developing community, and helping share, how the community is operating from your perspective. I think Dan has always been such an advocate of community, and how do we keep everybody engaged, and it's just really important about the culture of the village. I do appreciate him talking about the budget process, how comprehensive and collaborative it was. He did leave out how painful it was for everyone, but I kind of enjoy that part of it. I love budgeting, so there is probably a sickness that needs to be looked into there, but it is about our business plan, and we try to establish some accountability with it. But it does take a lot of time turning stones and looking for opportunities in how to mitigate some of the impact of it on you, because we know at the end of the day. Oh, okay. Let's see. All right, you got them. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, we had that all worked out and forgot about it. I'm sorry. Okay, no sleeping though. Keep an eye on your neighbor. If they start to nod, okay. But, so we do establish accountability in it so that we can, make sure that when we go through the year, if things are changing, we understand why they're changing. What do we need to do to kind of compensate for some of that, to minimize some of that impact on you? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you are the customer. You are the major source of all of our revenue. And so, it is important that we are sensitive to that, because at the end of the day, you run out of money, guess who else still has to pay for it, right? We still have to pay for it. So it's a very delicate dance for the village and all of that. So we're going to talk a little bit about, the guidelines, some of our timelines as well, so you kind of know how we put things together. For you have been around here for a few years, none of this is going to be any new news to you, but for those that one person in the back, this might be new for them. And we'll talk about the budget, the projects, and some of the areas of vulnerability that we'll be watching the year. So just from a process timeline, once we go through those multiple iterations of the budget, as a staff, we get that done, and then we present it to the Finance Committee on the 17th of January, and then after they take a look at it, provide feedback, we take that 2 weeks later to the Finance Committee again with the board to kind of prepare them to approve that budget in February. So there are multiple times that the Finance Committee sees this, the board looks at it, so that we can get a lot of feedback. Even before we get to February 8th, our directors see it, the resident finance committee sees it, and then even our leadership sees it. So we really run it through a lot of different filters to make sure that by the time we get to February 8th, we're very confident to present a budget, that has a lot of support from associates and residents. So guidelines, our guideline is year after year, our revenues need to increase by 0.5% more than expenses. And that's necessary so that we can continue to build operating margin. So in theory, if we execute on the budget every year, that operating margin should increase. This year, we're looking at operating revenues have increased by 6.5%. Our operating expenses are 5.9%. And so that gives us a spread of about 0.6%. So that we have worked through this enough to be able to meet those guidelines. So this is our key assumptions. So basically this shows the assumptions for FY23, and these are all budget numbers, these are not actual. So 23, 24, and then 25. And one of the most, important things for, all of you is to see that, our monthly service fee rate change is going to be at 5.4% this year. Last year it was 5.9. The year before it was 4.4. And so all the different areas where under private pay will be 5.4. The average increase in our entrance fee rate will be 4%. And then our ancillary revenues rates should be up by 5%. These are show a lot of the assumptions that we have for Medicaid and Medicare. You can see in different businesses, Medicare goes one direction and the other business it goes a different direction. And so, like in the case of outpatient therapy, Medicare is going to go down 3%. In the care center, Medicare is actually going to go up 4%. So it's a lot of variances here that that we have to mitigate to get into one impact on revenue. Pay increases for our associates. We had a 3% in FY23. We're showing of 3% in FY24. But what really happened in FY24 is we had this $1 million for compression increases and market adjustments. And so ultimately this $1 million ended up turning that FY24 in 3% to almost 6%. And so that has been really helpful in impacting our open positions. It's and impacting some of our turnover. So from a standpoint of quality of care, our service levels, we're starting to see them go up, and that's a good thing. Ultimately, that's what we wanted to see happen. It's kind of the good news, bad news, right? And I'll show you some of how that impacts our labor increases next year because of that. Yes. Yeah. It'll show you all the different, the changes in our labor structure. So that will help. And so this year, just to stay market competitive so that we don't end up having more turnover, there's a 4% increase. And that's an average increase. This is just, some of the health insurance utilization, increase in the health insurance cost year over year. You can see when we went from FY23 to FY24, we actually had a reduction, but this year it's really going up around 9%. These are a lot of labor contingencies in here. If you look at all of this, it has to do with agencies and creating vacancies for for some of the staffing vacant positions. You'll see that as I go through some of the FTE schedules, how that is represented. And then you're looking at, we have legal contingencies of $50,000, is way down from previous years. Our consulting, we've left at 75. This is the rate adjustment, market adjustment of $300,000. And then we've got a revenue contra of about $700,000 in there. So we go through all of the assumptions, and this is what kind of drives our actual budget. And really, if you kind of recall, we always use the forecast as the basis of our budgeting. So when you look at where we're at in FY24, this is the budget, this is the forecast, this is actual. You can see when we come down to operating income, we're going to be about $100,000 off. Now, when Jim gave his report, this is as of September, and if you look at where we're at today, that variance looks like it could be closer to maybe $200,000 or $300,000. So, we are seeing a little, as the labor costs are growing, our health benefits, the benefit side is growing, it's putting a lot of pressure on the operating margin. So when you look at FY25 then, and you look at revenues, this is by grouping, so monthly service fees, with is going to be 6.2% with a rate increase and with growth. Health services revenue is going to be up about 6.7%. And other revenues, a lot of this is out of dining service. It's small, but as a percentage is still about 9%. So a lot of growth in that area. When you look at our operating expenses, you can see our salaries and benefits are going up almost 8.8%. And so you've got the 4% from wage increase, but then you've got another almost 4.8% that's about filling positions and growing some of our FTEs. Benefits and taxes, it's 2%. While that looks really good, when you look at what happened between the budget and actual, you can see there's almost over a $500,000 variance there in our forecast to budget. And so what's happening is we'll get to reserve area, to the right reserve levels for workers' comp, and we don't have to adjust it that much in going into 25. So we're able to keep that at only at 2%. I think agency is going to come down and some of the other professional fees to offset some of the increases. You got supplies and equipment going up 8.6. You got utilities going up just slightly, and insurance and taxes. This 8.6% is really driven by property. So we're looking at our property insurance this year increasing by almost 30%. And if you look at property insurance over the last 3 years, it's grown almost 120%. I mean, it is just, it's a very, very tough market. A lot of carriers getting out of the business altogether because of the catastrophic events that have happened across nationally and also across the world. It really has made property a very difficult place to make money. So a lot of carriers said, you know what, we'll just get out until they keep raising the rates to the point where I think now we can maybe make some money at it. But that has taken a while. Yes. And then the others, it's also taxes, property taxes. They've been going up about 10% a year. And I'm sure you've seen it on the news where it's been even greater than that. But we've been able to manage that at least around 10%. A little over 3 years ago, it was almost a 35% increase. So, the property insurance and taxes have been really difficult. Also inside of this is auto insurance, right? We all know how auto insurance has gone up. And so, that has been a tough one to kind of manage as well. Other operating expenses up about 6.7 or 7.6%. So, when you blend it all together, it's a 5.9, and that gets us to the spread that we need. It adds about $750,000 of operating income from the forecast of this year. So this is what the revenue part of it looks like. When you look at the green numbers here are the change from rate. So that means your 5.4%, all the changes in the Medicare, Medicaid, all those things run through here. And then all the volume changes where you have more activity, like we're seeing in home health, we're predicting in home health and hospice next year, really shows up here. Even your increase in census with assisted living or in senior living would show up here as well. And so here's your $4.7 million increase, the 6.5%. And when you look at there's a fairly large percentage of that comes from rate increase. But ultimately, it only gives us about a 3.9% increase in revenue if we just use rate only. So some of the rates going up, some of them going down, you end up with 3.9%. So it's the volume, right, from home health and hospice, almost $1.7 million, $1.8 million here, that really increases, by 2.7% to get us to the 6.6%. So there's a lot of, a lot of focus on the activity that's supposed to come out of home health and hospice this next year. In a large part, if we didn't have this, the rate increase, obviously, the 5.4% would not have been enough, right? So we'll all be cheering on Anthony this next year and those from home health and hospice. So here's just a little schedule that kind of shows you how things have been working as far as open positions. And open positions, they end up driving a lot of the turnover. And so when you look at, this is at the end of last year, beginning of this fiscal year, you can see we had about 133 open positions, represented about 90 FTEs. And so during the year, you can see how that's come down. This is the end of December. FTEs, full-time equivalents. So basically, we take all the worked hours and divide it by 80, and that's how we get to FTEs. Because from a position standpoint, you can see there's a lot of part-time positions, a lot more positions that are there. But if you take all those positions, total all the hours and divide it by 80, that gives you your full-time equivalents. Yeah, thanks, Dan. So what's happened is over the last 6 months, really our positions, we've filled 39 of the positions, which equals filling about 24 FTEs. So that's pretty significant, really, when you think about where we were at. That's almost a 30% reduction in open positions during the period. And that's really helping with the quality of care. You can see some of this is, pretty significant here in dining services, and then also our public safeties areas. A lot of activity there, filling positions, and then of course when we got the care center and also village assisted living up here. So this is another comparison, just to give you an idea. These are the number of FTEs that we budgeted in 21. So there was 767. In 22, it was 709. In 23, it went to 691. In 24, we were down to 650. And this year so far has been running about 610. So that's 40 FTEs right there. And now in the 610 is also agency. So if you take the agency out and you're trying to reconcile it back to that last slide, there's about 26 or more FTEs of agency in here. And so we've budgeting into this fiscal year 25, 643. So that's an increase of almost 33 FTEs in 25 that we're having in 24. And so that's pretty significant dollars on top of the 4% increase. 33 FTEs is a lot of dollars, and I'll show you that slide too. So really, when you look at over a period of time, you've seen that this coming down, but largely it's all coming down out of the VCC. Not a lot of change in activity really, with the rest of the organization. Senior living has been coming down. We've tried to budget it at a higher level, but you can see that we're running at 222 right now, trying to get up to 242 next year. So what does that look like dollar-wise? So when you look at an increase of 33 FTEs, between the rate and the increase, it's about $3.4 million. And so it costs a lot to labor is like 68%, of the cost of the village. The good news is that, the increase in a lot of these areas like village assisted living and the VCC, senior living, this is trying to get our labor at a point where we have a high quality of care, we have a high level of services. Those are the things that you expect when you came into the village. Over COVID and over the last couple of years with turnover and just the labor market itself has made that very, very challenging. We all know that. So while we're really pleased to see this grow, obviously at the end of the day, it has impact on our cost structure. And so, but it is something that, we feel is really important to the village. So this is just kind of breaks down expenses by department. And so looking at life enrichment, salons, dining service, public safety, marketing, operations, information technology, finance, village administration, human resources, and human resources benefits. The biggest, we're seeing a lot of income coming out of a change in income coming out of the salons, which is very nice. But the biggest changes in our cost really are going to be in dining services. It's at 10.4%, which is great. I mean, I think that at the end of the day, we've got some labor costs that are in there, but we all know that supplies and food costs are important, and you'll benefit from that. And then when we look at the operations services, that's 15.1%. A lot of that has to do with labor, supplies, a lot of things that really directly impact you on a day-to-day basis. So here's the ratios. This gives you a little bit of a trend from 21 to 23. This is all actual. And then you've got the budget of 24 and the budget of 25. And then here's where we think we're going to forecast on 24. So you can see almost in all cases, our actual for 24 is going to exceed budget, except for on our net operating margin. The trends have been good. It's been increasing. We have seen a decrease in our days cash on hand, but some of that's just because of our expense ratio is going up. Not because of cash going down. When we look at our debt service coverage ratio, it's been moving up nicely over the past 4 years, and we expect it still to be pretty high, 2% or 2 times in FY25. Net operating margin has been going up nicely. This really reflects some of the results of our entrance fee proceeds. So strategically, if you think how has all of this building impacted, our financials, it has created more inventory, it's created more entrance fee contract participation, which is driving a lot of this net operating margin adjusted up. And, we've already talked about how, Jim gave in his report how we're already $3 to $4 million over budget, and we're only 3/4 of the year, through the year. And so, we're going to do really well in net operating margin adjusted, even though, the operating margin might be slightly below what we've targeted. And then in next year, we're looking at somewhere around 7%. And, well, we'll talk about that later. So here's the capital budget. When you look at our routine capital, we're looking at, we budgeted about $3.4 million. We're going to spend at least 3.6, maybe even a little bit more than that next year, but it's about a $200,000 increase really in our capital budget. You can see some of the difference here is in renovations, is down about 300,000. Some of that's because as we've continued to renovate all of this, some of the renovation per unit has come down some. But what we constantly do to Mary Beth is we give her a budget, then we steal her budget during the year. And, and so she's kind of like, well, what is my budget, right? Well, so we've done a little closer calculation of that, and they said, okay, let's just create contingency. Instead of taking it out of renovations budget from year to year, let's set something aside, and we know where, what some of those, at least what we have to use in renovations, and that we'll be able to focus and really allocate the contingency more appropriately. The villas has gone up about $700,000. So end of the year, end of bottom line is we're up about $1 million in capital budget from FY24 to FY25. Capital projects. So I just wanted to give you kind of a recap of what we did with if you remember, back in April of 2021, when we did the Meadows expansion, we had $4.3 million of general capital over and above what the cost of Meadows 2. And so it went to Val Common Area renovations, so we spent somewhere around $1.6 million there. Peace Parkway, the promise that everybody was always looking for, when is that going to be fulfilled, right? And that, that Peace Parkway is really much nicer now than it was 3 years ago. FG&H, buildings improvements, and admin roof was in there. And then we had the Villager End improvements. So that's where the $4.3 million went. And we're almost done with the Villager, so it's taken almost 3 years to kind of complete the spend on all of that. 25 projects, we're going to have phase 10 of the villas, and we'll be working on that, trying to complete it. Should start in April, and hopefully it goes as smooth as Villas 9 has. And then we'll also be working on the phase 11 site, so that we can begin to prepare it like we did for 10. Yeah, not identified yet, so not to worry. It's not your house. E-building, we're working through $1.7 million of funds on the pre-development side that has been approved by the board. The idea is, by the time we get done with that, we have 36 conversions. So that means you have 10% deposits to be before you go into financing. And right now, I think Jim, shared that we have 28, and that kind of moves. 29? Okay, perfect. But wait a minute, by the time I'm done here, we could be 30, or it could be back 28. That's the bad news. It does have a little bit of a jump to it once in a while. But that's still all good. And then the financing for the e-building, we're already starting to work on that. Part of that, in that bond financing, we're also looking at refinancing the 2014 bonds, which will help reduce some of our debt service and create more capacity moving forward. So any of you holding your 2014 bonds out there, don't hold them too tight, because probably in about 3 or 4 months. We'll be watching that. Obviously, the market has to be in the right place. I mean, the market is kind of volatile, so if it jumps up and it's not in the right place, then we won't refinance those bonds. But at this point, it does make sense. It's about a 7% savings. Looking for additional work that needs to be done in the Villager, and looking at potentially pickleball courts coming in 25. And then we've talked about the dog park, where that's going to be funding from the foundation. Some of our vulnerabilities, when you look at it, housing market, so a lot of our, our proceeds from entrance fees are really relying on the housing market, depends on how well it does. That covers a big portion of our debt service. So we always kind of keep an eye on the housing market and interest rates. You look at home health and hospice, big increase in their business this year. So that's an area we'll be watching closely, and hopefully there's no staffing issues along, because the EMR is supposed to really improve some of the productivity there. So they do feel like the current level of staffing can drive a lot more visits, a lot more admissions, which will drive revenue. And then if you look at our operating margin, this is where we talked a little bit about, we like to get to a target of about 0.8 times debt service. So like if you're at $10 million of debt service, you'd like to have your operating margin somewhere around 8 million, right? Well, we're running in 24 is going to be about 0.32, and with the budget for 25, it should be about 0.4. So we're about halfway where we really need to be very comfortable, from operations covering our debt service coverage. Debt service coverage, we have a covenant with investors that we need to be at 1.2 times the debt service coverage. Our debt service runs about $9 million a year. And so the covenant says that, we need to be able to cover that 1.2 times. And then our days cash on hand, we have a covenant that says we have to be at 120 days. So the good news is we're doing really well. There's a lot of capacity for us between the covenant and actually where we're at today. So that's the good news. The thing is, if we run it at 0.4 times debt service coverage with revenue only, then we're very dependent on entrance fee proceeds, right? And then if the housing market goes a little crazy, then it has a chance to impact that and then our debt service coverage as well. Okay, that's it. Oh, I'm over. Darn. Go ahead, Jim.
Kim, you mentioned early in the process of the budget that you go to the finance committee. It might be important to understand there are two finance committees. Yes. There's a board finance committee and a residential finance committee.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. So when we talk about the finance committee that we go to in the beginning, it's the board finance committee, and then we take it again to the board finance committee on the 31st, and then we go to the resident finance committee. We did that on the 31st as well. So we left one meeting, went right into the next meeting, and so that is a very one works in a more of an advisory capacity. The other kind of works as just looking and providing some feedback. So, yeah.
But we do have a resident on the board.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would say, would you please explain to people how the debt service ratio, how the ratios and the debt service coverage all impact, why they're important, because they impact our bondholders?
Yeah, so the question was, explain how debt service coverage impacts our bondholders and ratios. And so the reason we look at these ratios is, and why we focus on them versus just showing you an operating statement and that's all that we work from, is that investors and Fitch all look at these ratios to rate the community. We are a BB plus rated community by Fitch. So what that means is they've looked at our bonds and they look at our financial strength, take a look at all those things and come back with a rating. And so they want to look at what's your days cash on hand look like, what's your debt service coverage, and your NOM and your adjusted NOM. They look at probably about 9 more ratios, but these are the key ratios that everybody looks at. What would it take to get an A rating? Well, Well, it is available. I don't know strategically if I would want to do that because what happens when you get an A rating, your days cash on hand gets to be somewhere around 500 or 600 days of cash on hand. Well, I don't know that that's the best place for us to keep it. You know, if anything, we're probably looking at a triple B or a triple B plus. You know, that 0.8 debt service coverage revenue only. That's a triple B number. The days cash on hand would be somewhere around 380, 370 days. We could probably get by with 250 to 60 because we're so big. Most communities are, you know, remember that a day's worth of cash at the village is about 190 to 200,000 a day, right? Most communities, that's a lot smaller, and so it's easier for them to get to higher days cash on hand.
People need to understand too, their tax interest is tax exempt. We work with the Lee Summit Development Authority, and we're one notch at BB plus, that we're one notch below investment grade. So getting that next.
Yeah, so Jim was trying to explain that, you know, our bonds are muni bonds, so they're tax exempt bonds, and we run them through the IDA of Lee Summit. You know, so at a double B plus, that's really considered non-rated, non-investment grade bonds. When you get to triple B, then it is a rated bond, and so, I mean, it's a investment grade bond. And so ideally, you like to be there, and that's where we're trying to go, but a lot of that means we've got to redevelop the campus to grow that financial strength. And so it doesn't happen overnight. Bill?
Yes, the rate increase is 5%.
The rate increase is 5.4. 5.4. Yep. Yep. Yeah, that's an important piece of information for you to walk out here. Don't tell anybody 6%. Or at least they'll be happily surprised. But don't tell them 5%. Okay, everybody done? Good, thanks.
Thank you so much, Kim. Next month, Dan Rexroth will speak on our strategic plan. You don't want to miss that. Thank you all. Turn your cell phones back on.